Coming up on this episode of Nothing to Bring.
We talk about what's captured our geek interests, this inspection framework, and does it already disadvantage the disadvantaged, the CAS review, anti-Semitism in school, and is autism so broad a term that it's no longer useful?
I'm Matt Morris.
I'm Sarah Johnson, and we've got...
Nothing to Bring. See, that was slick.
I don't know if it was. I felt you did a slight pause, despite you admonishing me for doing a pause during our practice segment.
I mean,
Just
it was
to say
much...
as well, for those listening, Mr. Matthew Morris has given me further guidance and ways to deliver this podcast. He's been very, very strict. I feel admonished.
It's the producer in me.
So I've had to take notes about how to improve. So I hope that it actually hits with a reality that it becomes better.
I did feel it was more of a conversation than me. You've made it sound like I've told you off. So in the last one that we put out, which is actually a really old recording, but we kind of found it, pulled it out, edited it, and put it out as the last episode. You feel like I tell you off within the first 3 seconds of that episode as well.
I'm feeling very sensitive at the moment.
Okay. Well, I apologise if it sounded like I was telling you. I wasn't. I was just saying, look, let's try these things because then it's better for our audience.
So we're going to try something a little bit different, a little bit new, and hopefully you like what we do. If you do, hit that subscribe button, like, and all those sorts of things. That would be fabulous. So what's captured your geek this week, Matt?
Right, I've written a list down because I know you've written down a list. Yeah, you've written down like a list of education stuff.
Yeah,
so
I've gone fully educational. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So we're into the Easter holiday, and I guess by the time this episode comes out, we will have already got to the end of the Easter holiday, I think. So what's captured my geek? So first of all, because it's the Easter holiday, 2 things are going to drive my holiday. Number one is that I will be in the garage for quite some time because I'm boarding out and turning the garage into a bit of a man cave. So I started that last Easter.
You did?
I did, yeah. And I really got into it. And I sort of, it's three walls are done. I've got to do the other wall, the floor.
What are you going to do in your man cave?
So we've got all of the old video games, so all of the video game systems.
Have you got SNES?
PlayStation. Well, I don't have the originals. I've got the minis. They're up here on my wall, actually.
Okay.
So I've got the mini NES, the mini SNES. I've got original N64 and GameCube.
Nice.
And then we've got PlayStation 1, 2, 3, 4. We've got an Xbox 360. So we've got all these systems.
Amazing.
And they're all going to go into the garage, and the TV's going to go into the garage as well.
Can I come round and play?
Absolutely, you're invited any time you want to come play. So it's going to turn into a bit of a games room, gaming. We're going to put some of the Lego out there as well. So it's going to take some of the stuff that's in our house out. So all the stuff that I'm kind of surrounded by. So like all these Lego bits that I've got, just no room for them in the house. So they're going to go. So I've started building the Lego Goonies. That ship is not going to fit in the house. So there's got to be somewhere for it.
Are we going to do a podcast in there as well?
Yeah. So eventually that's going to be where the studio that I use, a studio. Look at us as if we're some sort of professionals.
Our rooms.
But it'll be a bit more like what you've got there. I'll have the equivalent here once it's finished. So that's going to be a big feature of
we've got a lot of Transformers happening behind me. Right
you
now.
have, and my aim is to have a lot of my kind of paraphernalia going on as well. So that's part one. The other part, the bit that's probably taken up my evenings more so, is, as I say, I'm a big video gamer, and the game that's kind of captured my attention for about the last 20 odd years is World of Warcraft. And it's the game I've consistently played for 20 odd years. I actually find it really difficult to play video games at the moment. Anytime I sort of sit down and play a game, I'm bored of it within 10 minutes. I find it really difficult to get into new games. And I'm finding that I'm going to my phone a lot more and sort of very simple, quick hit mobile stuff. And some of those serious things like Far Cry and Fallout and all those open world games that I used to really, really love. I just can't get into
and
it
stuff like that. I used to love playing Morrowind.
Skyrim,
and things like Icewind Dale, all of that. I used to really, really enjoy them. I used to play a lot of Halo and Gears of War as well. But I've not played really, in particular, any game for about 10 years.
No, so I've tried to go back into my gaming because I do enjoy it, and it's just a nice kind of thing to kind of relax to. But World of Warcraft has just released, or earlier this month released, the the new expansion, which is called Midnight. So I never go into them early. I never go into them on like day one. I've had my fingers burnt by that before. A few years back, that they were a bit glitchy on kind of open. So I used to be one of those people who would be there ready to go at sort of midnight to go into the new expansion. And when the Draenor one came out, it really didn't work very well. The new technology, which is called phasing, that they brought in, which the game is all pretty much uses all the time now, really buggy. And so the game was really laggy and the servers were down quite a lot. It was really difficult to get into. So I tend to wait a couple of weeks after it's released and then I
Get
really
rid of
get
all the
into it.
bugs first before you
Yeah.
actually. Yeah, otherwise you're
And
going to
I'm
get
not-
disappointed.
Yeah, and I'm not one to race towards the end content either. I like to play the new, even though you get like 10 levels, I like to play through the new content, the new zones, any new races, and then go into the end content. I used to be, if we go back 15, 18 years ago, I was a proper hardcore raider in a guild every night. No, absolutely. You know, sit
When you said
down.
raider,
block
there's
set time.
there's a song, Hardcore Raver, and that's what it reminded me of. So I just played it in
Well,
my
you
head.
know,
Yeah. 1,
each to
2,
their
3,
own, I
4.
guess.
Who's knocking on my door? Hardcore Raver. Let me in. I want some more.
Definitely raider. There was nothing that intense about it. It was just me in a room, the computer, and 39 other people online doing this
Yeah,
content.
shenanigans.
So that's the other bit, really getting into that and really quite enjoying it. I do enjoy the new expansions when they're released. So that's the other big thing. We are into boot fair season again, and you know how much I love a boot fair. And I think I said this to you before. I've always had this idea of just doing like little shorts of all the things I buy at the boot fair.
Yeah, you have.
Like the little the bargains. I mean, here's one I've got here, which is apt because we talk about sort of Transformers and stuff all the time. It's a Hot Wheels Optimus Prime.
Oh, it's very cute.
Which is pretty
cool.
Was
that a boot fair as well?
Well, yeah. Well, that was actually from a charity shop.
Okay.
I'd been to the boot fair and I went to a charity shop on the way home, and that was £1.
Brilliant.
They're relatively. This is relatively. I think it's either 25 or 26 year of release, so it's not that old. But actually, to pick it up for £1,
yeah, it's brilliant.
Still completely carded and in good condition, was quite good. But I've got a load of bits that I think I'm going to do a few shorts on. I've picked up some really, really great little bargains, and I tend to go looking for toys and books and things, mostly for the kids actually, because we can put book after book after book in front of our kids, and they will just absorb them. So we could spend a fortune. So I tend to raid charity shops and book fairs just for books, because it's a brilliant way of creating a library in your house without spending too much money. So that's kind of my geek. I've retreated back into what I know.
Good.
I guess. Yeah. And
I'm looking
again,
forward to seeing how your kind of boarded up garage looks like and doing the podcast.
Boarded up garage makes it sound like I'm living in a hovel.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean like not boarded up as in sorted.
But done out, yeah.
Done up, done out.
And I'm trying to do it all myself and do it all quite cheaply, but I'm getting into the realms of electrics soon.
I'm so pleased that we live far enough away from each other for me not to be able to offer help.
Thank you. I do appreciate that. I mean, I don't know what to say there. That's like saying I would come and help you move house. I just can't be bothered.
I just don't want to.
Yeah, thank you.
That's all right. I would, but also I'd be useless at it.
Are you an electrician?
No.
Well, there you go.
I'd be absolutely useless at it. Really useless. Yeah, it's not my thing.
No. So, what's captured your geekery then?
I've been to Zambia.
You have.
And I went to an inclusion conference in Zambia and did about storytelling and social emotional mental health. But I also had the opportunity to find feathers, which was really good. So on the school grounds, there's peacocks, and the peacocks are there because they kill the snakes, some of which are poisonous. No, not poisonous, venomous. Sorry.
What's the difference?
Poison is if you eat it. Venomous,
I've been taught a lesson.
No, I hope I'm right then, because otherwise, this is out there and people think I'm truthful.
Well, we've got the comments section for all of that.
They'll say, "Oh, she doesn't know anything." They'll have a little moan about me getting something wrong,
That's
don't
fine.
they? So got a few feathers, peacock feathers, which was really good, and some guinea fowl feathers. I haven't really done much geekery because my focus has been on a kind of work, but I've also designed a new app, which I'm really excited about, on emotional well-being. That's been quite geeky, actually, because that's been a lot of stress testing, whether or not it works, how it works, what are the implications of it, how do we make it better to kind of track children's emotional well-being, but also thinking about how do you integrate it with a different management information system. So I've been geeky in a kind of work way. I suppose, which has been quite nice as well. I enjoy it. I read up on certain things, had a kind of perspective and views, so that's been quite good. So yeah, nothing as good as yours, I'm afraid.
Well, yes, because, we talk about geeky, actually. We talk about it's pop culture, culture in general. That's all part of what we consider. You must, observe and immerse yourself into the culture when you go to somewhere like Zambia.
It's really interesting. On the last day of the conference, they say about wearing clothes of your culture.
Yeah.
There's people that come from all over. They come from Zambia, but from also Zimbabwe, Kenya, and so on. And there's a type of material called chitenge, which are particular kind of swirls and shapes. And they make me a chitenge. Last time they made me a dress, this time they made me a skirt. The skirt had pockets as well, really exciting. So it's quite interesting seeing the vibrancy of the material and the fabrics. I think if you're in Britain, it's very different. It's very kind of somber clothing, isn't it? It's, your grey suits, whereas the men were wearing chitenge shirts and some of them wearing trousers or skirts. And it just looks amazing. But also, I think there's something about going to other countries where you learn a lot from the communities that you go to. I don't want people to think that I go over there and go, oh, yeah, we get it all right about inclusion in England, because we don't. So you learn a lot from other cultures and traditions and sort of think about, it helps kind of inform my practice enormously. I don't sort of just go over there to teach, but I sort of come back with a lot of learning as well. So it's really fascinating. I've just booked Kazakhstan, I'll be going to India soon as well, and Ghana. So I've got a few different kind of trips, which I'm quite looking forward to.
Fantastic. And it's always nice to hear. I mean, I was disappointed, and I think it was a more of a technical thing, because I know you said that the signal out there wasn't as great.
So bad.
I was really disappointed that you didn't FaceTime me or phone me to talk about stealing feathers from birds, because I do remember when you called me, and we've talked about it in this podcast, where you phoned me from abroad to steal the feathers off a dead bird.
Dead kingfisher. If that helps.
It was.
I don't know if that ameliorates it or makes it worse. Well, the internet was really poor. So I hoped, Matt and I hoped to be able to do a podcast whilst I was over in Zambia, but the kind of connection was so poor, it just wasn't possible. And it would have been irritating rather than kind of illuminating. So we didn't do it. It feels like it's been a while since you and I have actually had a podcast together. I feel
it was weird because, we recorded almost back to back 2 podcasts.
Yeah.
And then the second one we didn't use, but we used the content from an old one in fact, it was the first proper podcast we did that we didn't use. We did it, reflected on it, thought, no, we didn't really like the format. And I think what's happened is we've naturally moved towards a format, and now that podcast actually fits what we do.
I think it's fine.
So,
I listened to it.
It was, so the content worked really well. There's a bit of heavy editing that needed to be done, because obviously we've learned so much. One of the thing that annoyed me is we have learned so much about what we're doing here. The audio quality of that episode is nowhere as near as good as the quality that we get now. Not to say we're perfect or that we're studio engineers or any of that, but there was a few things we could do to tidy up the quality of it. But actually, it stands on its own. The content was great, and what was really good about the episode is there's a really really serious conversation about send and about send consultations and how we have what have we learned, how we're having another consultation. So when is this going to end? When are we actually going to do something with it? And it was interesting because that was a precursor to then the white paper, which is now out. So there's a whole full circle moment.
Yeah.
Well, and it's still relevant. And you come at it from the point of view of parent as well. I've got something for you. I don't know if I think I've shown you this. I don't know what to do with it, and I need your help.
Okay, I'm intrigued. I really hope
no, I have shown you this. It's going to look sinister because of the way it lights things up. But look, I've got that.
Yeah, I love it so much, and I want it.
Yeah, but I just don't.
Just for people who are just listening and not seeing it, it's a fluorescent, so neon lights which say on air, and I'm completely envious of it, and I want one for my house.
Yeah, so I'm trying to think of where it can go. The problem is it's on a cable, so you need something to. But because of the way I've got things set up in here, if you put it I thought a good place would be over here somewhere, but it burns out. I think it's one for when I'm in the actual garage when it's done proper.
That's a good idea. Yeah,
but,
as much as I want one, I don't know. I mean, it might be if I have one that it's just for me, just over to let people know I'm on air.
Well, look, if I find another on air sign, I'll get you one and I'll send it to you.
I really do like the lights and the visuals with those. There's a few different ones. I just find them really, really pretty. Really like them.
I have noticed that some podcasters, so I'm in a couple of groups on Facebook of people like us who do their own podcasts or are up and coming with podcasts, not to say we're up and coming, but are setting out on their own or are early in that journey. And they've got some people must spend a fortune to do this. And I've said this all along, you can do audio really, really cheaply. You don't need the same production values as you do with video. You don't need expensive cameras. So you can do audio really, really well. But they've got like really elaborate sets and they have that sort of neon light, but with their name or the brand of their podcast in it. So we need a neon nothing to bring.
I'd love that. I'd love that.
That would be great, wouldn't it?
I'm sure there's someone in my area that makes them.
I'm sure. You can get this sort of thing on Etsy and places all the time.
Yeah.
And there's loads of people who do these sorts of things. They just probably cost a bit of money to do, more so than you'd like to pay.
Yeah, because this is a vanity project, really, isn't it? Yeah. Well, it's a vanity project, but actually I do hope there is a sense that we're bringing some ideas and thoughts around different subject areas. And I suppose we do delve into things that are educational. And I suppose kind of on that note, there's a couple of different things I wanted to talk about in this podcast. I don't know if we're going to be able to cover all of them, but I thought I would start off with thinking about the Ofsted report cards and in particular around disadvantaged schools. So the new framework, most people are probably aware, for inspection was launched about 5 months ago by the time this comes out. And the idea is that schools don't receive one overall judgment. Instead, there's report cards showing colour-coded grades for different areas: achievement, inclusion, curriculum and teaching, attendance and behaviour, personal development and well-being. I'm not convinced that that's particularly different from an overall judgment, to be honest, but regardless, the kind of problem that seems to be emerging is that schools with the highest proportion of disadvantaged pupils are almost 3 times more likely to be marked below the expected standard on their achievement grade. And there's lots of conversations about actually there's a kind of tension there. Our school leaders are asking whether Ofsted is inspecting attainment rather than achievement in particular. So really the kind of marker here is around free school meals analysed. 33 received, so of the 100 highest free school meal schools analysed, 33 received an achievement grade below expected standard. 31 of those needs needs attention and 2 urgent improvement. I suppose the question kind of, does the kind of inspection framework have the kind of same structural problem? There's questions about whether or not Ofsted is genuinely reformed or just rebranded a high stakes culture, and is inclusion as a standalone judgment actually doing the work it was meant to do if achievement still penalises schools serving the hardest to reach children?
Can I jump in on the question you asked, which is, has it truly reformed? And the answer is no, it's exactly the same system, just with different scores on the doors. So essentially, the removal of the single word judgment. By the way, the single word judgment has not been removed. We think it's been removed, or what is published has been removed. But in conversations between Ofsted and the DfE, they still refer to schools as requires improvement. So, for example, I know of a school that was inspected after the single word judgment went, but under the old framework, where you were inspected under all the old categories, and you got good in all those categories, bar one. That school is officially referred to by the DfE and by Ofsted as a requires improvement school. So whilst single word judgment have gone, they still exist in the background. We will have lots of people tell us that's not the case. I have seen a letter where a school has been referred to as a required improvement school where there was no single judgment. So from that point of view, that hasn't changed. When it then comes to the gradings, it's just the same stuff in different boxes.
Differently packaged.
It's different packaging, exactly. It's all the same kind of rhetoric, and you look at the frameworks, you look at the toolkit, and nothing really is that different. What I would say is, I think it is now tougher to get a higher judgment. Now, it's supposed to be under this new framework. I'm not sure it needs to be, but what we're experiencing is some schools that were previously outstanding, who are no longer at the exemplary level that they would expect to be because they're examined. And they've been flawed because the grades they've got aren't the highest grades anymore. And what we're told is, well, actually, you've got to be in the very, very smallest subset of schools in order to get that. Why? It's the same argument with like A-star grades or level 9 grades when they changed. Why is it we have to cap the percentage who are allowed to get that grade? Why do we move the boundaries to ensure that only a certain percentage? If there are descriptors, if there is guidance, and you meet that guidance, then as far as anybody should be concerned, you've met the target. Imagine that in any other part of society. you'd be saying, well, you've missold something there, or, you've lied to me. How can it be that you have descriptors, you meet those descriptors, but you still can't have that grade? And that hasn't changed.
I wonder what Ofsted would say in response to that. Be interesting. It'd be interesting to...
Well, they've said it recently. They've said high standards. They said any of this kind of conversation, what we are saying here, all of the conversations that we had in very open public forums with Ofsted, and they've turned around and said, well, that's no excuse for high standards. It's all about high standards. No one doubts it's about high standards.
And high standards is really important. And I sort of, acknowledge that kind of high aspirations. To be truly inclusive means setting high standards for all children. And of course, I agree. But I suppose the lens in which we understand high standards might be different depending on where those children have come from and the impact that it might be having upon their attainment. If we're talking about children that have moved, they've moved schools 5 or 6 times, they might have moved into the country from a war-torn area, all these things might have happened, is actually the lens of understanding achievement for that child will be different to a child that has had no transitions, they've had smooth sailing, they've had families that have been able to afford all the resources in the world, and they don't have special educational needs either. We can have high expectations for both of them, but we know that there's been a different journey for those children as well.
And I don't think we've seen enough evidence yet on how specialist settings are coming out en masse. Yeah,
it's been not as many as has there, so it's been fewer.
No, so we can't really see.
Whatever the word is, I don't know.
Fewer inspections, less data. There's less evidence on which to base that sort of dialogue that you've just presented when it comes to the most vulnerable children who sit outside of mainstream.
Interestingly, we met as a PRUSAP group, so the national organisation that represents pupil referral units and alternative provision. Both Matt and I are executive members of that group, and we met on Friday to talk about the upcoming conference. And one of those bits is to ask people to talk about their experiences of Ofsted and to actually hear from the sector about what their experiences are, because we want people to be informed as much as possible and to demystify Ofsted and the new framework as much as possible as well. And I think Ofsted will be there too. So it'll be interesting kind of discussions and about people's experiences. Because I suppose you can write down anything you want on a piece of paper, but how it's enacted is based on people.
And there could be a really weird juxtaposition between Ofsted talking about the framework and their work in specialist settings, and then a panel of people who have experienced it. That's going to create a very interesting, I say juxtaposition actually, they could be very aligned. But it's going to be really interesting to hear that from both sides.
No, it'd be fascinating. So I've got another couple of things I wanted to talk about as well. The government's launched a few weeks ago now, so it'll probably be a month or so by the time this comes out, an independent review on how schools and colleges in England identify, respond to and prevent anti-Semitism. And I thought that was quite interesting. So there's the second highest annual total of anti-Semitic incidents recorded in 2025 at 3,700 incidents. And while school-related incidents in 2025 were 23% lower than in 2024, they're still double the levels typically seen before 2023. So obviously we know that the kind of geopolitical events are having an impact on children within our schools in England. Over a fifth of British Jewish parents report their children have experienced anti-Semitism at school or in its vicinity. But also, a survey found that 51% of Jewish members experienced anti-Semitism in the workplace in the past year. So I suppose for me, it's about thinking about the geopolitical framing and raising a kind of genuine question about how schools are expected to navigate conflict abroad in a classroom context. I hope that this will age really quickly and there won't be a war in the Middle East, but we're currently in a war in the Middle East and there's lots of tensions around that. I think it's interesting how it's having an impact on our children, not just in the Middle East, but our children in the communities in London and beyond.
That was going to be a question, actually. And I don't know if you have that. In fact, you've got a lot of data there. And clearly you've come to this far more prepared than I ever do. But you've got data there about the numbers of incidents, the impact. Interesting that you then referred to areas such as London, because it would be really interesting to see how those incidents spread across the country and are kind of populated around the country.
So my daughter, and actually I've just thought about it, my older daughter who's 16, child at her school said to her, he doesn't like Jewish people because Jewish people are bad. And my daughter was like, I am Jewish. And he was like, oh, but you're okay though. And I said, that's pretty anti-Semitic. and I think you should kind of report that. And she's kind of brushed it aside. So there's other bits there. It's going to be tip of the iceberg. But, I wonder if you're going to see pockets of anti-Semitism in Manchester, for example, where there's quite a strong Jewish community. Redbridge in London has a strong Jewish community. But is it worse or better if you go to somewhere like Thanet in Kent, for example? But also, I think there's conversations there that anti-Semitism is racism. So actually, what does racism look like, and how do schools feel prepared to be able to deal with racism in whatever format it comes from, whether or not it's anti-Semitism, it's anti-Islamic, whatever it might be? I think there's possibly, I'm Jewish, anti-Semitic is obviously something very important, but I think there's broader conversations about racism in general in our schools.
My worry is that we as teachers, as educators, do not have the time to properly address some of the topical issues that we see in society. Now, we know we should. And as I've said in previous podcasts, and I say this very publicly, teachers are the police of the world. We pick up every single ill in society, and we have to, in some way, try to show young people that it's either not right or to demonstrate right from wrong. And then we have to monitor, and we have to make sure that young people are developing in a really positive way. You have to do that alongside curriculums that are increasingly becoming tight on time, and without going into some of the ways that some multi-academy trusts work, are very, very prescriptive. And it's, you must deliver this content today by the end of that lesson and then move on, even if the children haven't learned it. So where do you find the time to and I'm not saying that schools aren't doing it. What I'm saying is, I worry that schools aren't properly addressing the issues. Yes, they might be saying, look, this is wrong. We shouldn't be accepting this behaviour. We shouldn't be doing those things. And a lot of schools do this really, really well. And a lot of schools have really developed PSHE and personal development programs. But with increasing stress on curriculum time, is there a risk that we're not going to be able to do all of it particularly well?
Do you think the curriculum reforms will make a difference?
I genuinely don't know. The problem you have is we're dealing with what's topical. When you design a curriculum around personal development, PSHE, those are designed around particular milestones in a child's development. And so, for example, if you take the relationships and sex education as a part of the statutory delivery in a school, it's usually planned to consider the development of young people as they go through, so that you have the right things delivered to young people from an early age, and it changes as you go through. So sex education is introduced. When you're talking about bombing overseas, and then that leads to bereavement, and that leads to hatred on our own streets as a result of the things, what if you're not at that point in your curriculum yet? What if you've not hit that stage in the delivery? That's the worry. Have we got the time to adapt and respond as necessary?
And what you don't want is a 10-minute assembly where children aren't particularly engaged and they don't listen to. I suppose it's about, I'm a citizenship teacher, so I was trained in PSHE and citizenship, and citizenship is no longer compulsory. And that was the avenue in which you spoke about some of these complexities, and clearly things like history as well, although sometimes it needs to be made really kind of obvious because they can't necessarily understand, they can't kind of see the generic and then put it kind of on the specific. And for me, I think citizenship is a kind of key area. But you're right, we're becoming more and more squeezed in terms of the curriculum. I had an interesting conversation with someone last week around equity in timetabling and curriculum, and talking about what we often do in terms of timetabling is focus on the year 10 and 11 as the most important year. His argument was year 7 is the most important year because that's the early intervention. I wonder if we should take in his argument, and I'm sure he would explain his argument better than I do, but actually putting in the resources in year 7 where we can really focus on the gaps on children's learnings, but also perhaps the kind of further argument is some of those complexities around race, religion, ethnicity, protected characteristics, war, anti-Semitism, racism, and so on, and really kind of front-loading it rather than waiting until it's too late. When you look at your 15, 16-year-olds, it's difficult to change their perspective, whereas when they're year 7, year 8, then we've got a little bit more chance. Primary school, obviously, as well. But this is not the first time my older daughter's had anti-Semitism either. She was part of a group chat on WhatsApp, and one of the boys changed the picture to a Nazi symbol.
Do you think that's born out of somebody thinking they're being funny?
Yeah, possibly, but you could talk about it as microaggressions, couldn't you, really?
Of course you could. Yeah, of course you could.
Do they know the implications?
Do they know what they're doing? Yeah.
Possibly not. If my daughter can pick up the implication, and then she's the same age, but then I suppose they might be more immature. But
And here's the thing, with your daughter, you mentioned earlier how she didn't want to necessarily make an issue of that child previously saying that thing. And I think one of the things we really do need to absolutely instill in our young people, our own children, is that ability to call out behaviours. That's not to, now. I want to be really careful there, because there's a risk of victim shaming by saying you should do that to stop that from happening. That's not what I'm saying. What I am saying is it absolutely should be the norm for somebody to call out behaviour and people to go, I've messed up there.
Yeah,
because even in adult life,
snitches get stitches, like rather than that kind of philosophy. But actually, it's okay to be able to say that doesn't make me feel, that makes me feel uncomfortable. And actually, do you know the implications of that? And being able to call it out. I think children possibly have less words to be able to do that. But then maybe that's how we model as adults and grown-ups. And actually, the curriculum doesn't have to be what you deliver in lessons. It's your modelling, isn't it, as well, about how you manage those conversations in a class and those questions, I suppose, as well.
Yeah, and I say this all the time, that what we should have as leaders, this isn't me being critical of anybody, this is me just saying that leaders in schools should be the absolute role models of everything that we want from our young people. So the behaviours that we see in them, and those behaviours extend not just to the pupils, but also to the staff, to the parents, to the wider community. Those behaviours, I talk about decency a lot. It's not difficult to just be a decent person.
Yeah.
Yeah, I worry. I see people who just can't do that on a day-to-day, just don't know how to talk to each other. But we should absolutely, in the way that we behave, we speak to each other, we respect each other, we should be modelling all the time that we're around young people. We should be modelling how to be a decent human being, how to be a citizen.
The other last thing I want to talk about is the Department for Education has launched its consultation on proposed revisions to keeping children safe in education. And there's kind of a couple of key changes that I want to talk about, some of the things that are quite relevant to what we talk about. AI deepfakes are now explicitly named as child-on-child abuse. There's a new section on mobile phones that all schools should be mobile phone-free environments by default. Doesn't mean you can't, but by default rather than anything else. But also interestingly, and perhaps kind of most contentious, CAS review principles are now integrated into the statutory framework. On gender questioning children, involving parents is a default in the vast majority of cases, unless a documented specific safeguarding risk exists. And the draft KSIE mandates no exceptions for single-sex facilities based on biological sex. So the takeaways from the CAS review is that the evidence base for clinical interventions for body dysmorphia was poor, but that was contested. We've seen there's a high level of bias, methodological flaws and misrepresentation of evidence. The argument is in the CAS review that social transition of gender is an active healthcare intervention, so therefore more caution should be advised for children compared to adolescents. But there's no specific recommendations for schools, which is a challenge for those schools that might have adopted gender-affirming toolkits in particular. Brighton is one of those local authorities that have done that. But also, whilst the CAS review is being actively contested, we're still being asked to adopt it in the Geeky guidance as well. I was wondering whether or not to discuss this, and actually the CAS review talks about the toxicity of the debate has made some professionals unable to discuss their viewpoints. So a couple of different things with the Geeky. Also a new section saying that there should be a confidential shared mailbox for the DSL, just in case they're missing, they're absent, which is a very kind of administrative task, but really obvious that you don't want the DSL to just go to one mailbox because if they're on.
Interesting. But that's really interesting, actually, because we've just been contacted by one of our local authorities who said, can you make sure that this mailbox is in place by certain date and then say to us that it's been done? We've had that mailbox that they want in place for 5 years.
Yeah, it makes entire sense, doesn't it? You don't want to rely on one person.
Yeah.
So if someone's got shared access, and obviously it needs to be confidential shared mailbox, I'm not saying that everyone in the school has it, but actually it does need to be kind of addressing if someone's absent. It feels like a kind of quick win, really. Very simple.
And that was for that local authority. One of our other local authorities, that was the expectation of schools 10 years ago. And that was a local authority expectation, not just a good practice. That was we want to know it's there and we want to know what it is and we're going to use it. So it really feels like playing catch up on good practice that we've, as practitioners, have been doing for a really long time.
Yeah.
I mean, it's good to see it there, but at the same time,
I suppose it's if the schools haven't done it, now that they've seen it, they'll go, oh, okay, yeah, that's obvious, we will do it.
Yeah.
So, I
Yeah.
mean, I wonder how many people it will really affect. Another kind of contentious thing, my last thing that I'm going to talk about in terms of education. So Dame Uta Thrift wrote for TES magazine, and she was talking about the hesitancy to comment on rising diagnosis of ASD. And she wanted to look at the kind of actually the overdiagnosis of ASD. She had said the spectrum has gone on being more and more accommodating, and I think now it has come to collapse. So she argued that the original diagnostic criteria, being lifelong neurodevelopmental challenges with communication and restricted behaviours, remain valid, but that the broadened interpretation had lost clinical significance. She suggested the current spectrum model fails to distinguish between meaningful subgroups, particularly between individuals diagnosed early in life with intellectual disability and those diagnosed later, often adolescents and young women, who may experience high anxiety and social difficulties without intellectual impairment. And I think what was interesting about that was actually there was a huge backlash to what she was saying. And Thrift was one of the main people who basically translated Hans Asperger's 1944 paper into English. She knows her stuff. Critics accused her of being out of touch, of wanting to send autism back to the dark ages, and discounted her experience because she ignores their lived experience. So lots and lots of contention around that. But I just found it interesting about what we're allowed to talk about and what we're not allowed to talk about without instant kind of outrage and backlash. And again, I've been kind of tentative about talking about this. And I think, but these are the fundamentals around education, because these are our children that are being diagnosed with autism. These are our children that identify not in the body that they were born in, and so on. So I think these are worthy to talk about without being afraid that we're going to be cancelled, we're going to be spoken about on X or Blue Sky in kind of really negative ways, because actually there should be a place for debate and discussion that's respectful.
Yeah. Unfortunately, we live in a sort of a post-truth era, where not all views are considered, where unfortunately, depending on who you are, when we've got this really weird kind of thing now, which is that I, as a middle-class white male...
Don't you feel proud that you're middle class? You'd been working class a few years ago, mate.
I have no illusion that I come from a very, very working-class background, okay? But as a white middle-class male, I understand... I've said this before, haven't I? I understand the privilege that I, have afforded to me every single day that other people don't. And what that means is that people don't want to hear my opinion on certain things. And I'm okay with that. I'm okay with the idea that if my opinion gets in the way of the right people being heard, I'm okay with my opinion not being heard, if that makes sense. But if we got it right and we accepted everyone's opinion, it wouldn't matter. I understand that I go through life with a certain amount of privilege, and I'm happy to get out of people's way. But at the same time, I want to be supportive and I want to be an ally to people. And I feel that privilege stops me from doing that, because either people think I'm doing it for the wrong reason, or because I'm trying to enforce an opinion that, when actually I just want to help.
So when I was in Zambia, one of kind of my views was that I probably shouldn't be there next year, because there should be more people from Zambia talking about Zambian issues. You don't need a white middle-class woman being essentially colonialising and going, this is what I think should be happening within your country. Now, I feel like I learn a lot from Zambia and the countries I go to. But that was my viewpoint. We need more people from Zambia talking about Zambian issues. I still love to go back to Zambia, so I still want to return. But yeah, I also come from a privileged position. But actually, do I come from a privileged position? Because, I've had a difficult background and all those sorts of things. But at the same time, being a white woman gives me certain kind of privileges, perhaps compared to black women, for example. And there's a lot of kind of intersectionality as well. So whilst it might look like I'm a white woman with privilege, I also have significant mental health issues and come from a kind of poor background in the past. So I think who we present and represent, I think, is often more complicated than what you just see. But to that end, I'm really aware that the people that we've interviewed on this podcast are white men. So, how do we make sure that we have a mixture of different guests who represent different groups and communities, and how will that enrich our conversations? Because it will do.
Absolutely. And I think that, we can put down a marker here and kind of have an ambition to say, let's capture views that are relevant to education and geekery within the podcast that can cover all a really wide range.
But don't look like us.
Yeah, absolutely.
That'd be great.
It would. We got quite deep there. Can I go after something you said right at the start? Did I hear you say that they were consulting around AI?
Deep fakes.
And deep fakes.
Yeah, so they're talking about essentially, that's quite difficult as well. So deep fakes is now being explicitly named as child-on-child abuse. So, for example, using the image of a child and sexualizing it in a pornographic material would be seen. So that's kind of AI deep fake. So the idea is that you could use my imagery and to kind of present something sexual, pornographic, or whatever it might be, but it's not me actually doing it.
Yeah. And for me, that's a good step forward.
Yeah.
It's a step forward. There are many other steps forward that we could be taking right now, but at least it's a start.
And it is seen as child pornography as well, I'm sure, wouldn't it? It's
and I think
virtue.
Yeah, it always. I think this is the issue, though. And this is the big debate that's going on with AI at the moment, is how they classify it, because I think they're struggling to actually get their head around the idea of what it is. So there is a huge debate at the moment about whether or not AI generated content can be copyrighted. See, however, I don't think anybody has tried to put across the idea that AI generated pornography isn't pornography.
Yeah, it's just pornography.
Because I think it's, by definition, it has to be. Right, I said this when we interviewed DC Bradshaw a couple of podcasts ago. I said this off camera, and I didn't record this, and I really wish I did, because I'm going to say it now, because we've got to do something because I said we're in a post-truth era. It's really easy to watch AI-generated content, which is really misleading, which has the capacity for division. I'm really worried about the next election and how much AI-generated content is used to sway people's opinion. And I say this as someone who comes from Kent, who has seen AI-generated content of people on beaches angry about people coming ashore. And none of those people were there. They were just made up. It's all just generated content just to fuel hatred. Here's what I said offline. I believe that we already have the means by which to tag AI-generated content. And I think the metadata of any content which is generative AI, so any content which has either been produced or has been produced to look like something else but uses generative AI to produce the content, it should be tagged in the metadata as AI. And then when it is posted onto any platform, you would be able to see that was AI-generated content because you would be able to see the tags. And I think that very, very easy, simple step would go a long way to ensuring people knew whether they're watching something that was accurate or inaccurate. Not true, because true is a weird concept. And I talked about this before with documentary. We study the truth, versions of the truth. Non-AI content can be untruthful or misleading, but at least with AI content, we could tag it to ensure that we knew how it had been created. When that happens, by the way, I said it first on this podcast.
I like it. No. What happens if someone else has already said it? It doesn't matter. You said it first.
If someone else has already said it, well done. I've not heard that. Congrats to them. We are just very, very intelligent people who think alike.
I'm Sarah Johnson.
I'm Matt Morris, and we've got
nothing to bring.